Welcome to Mind Decoded, where we explore the psychology behind human behavior. Let's decode today's topic. Someone cuts you off in traffic. You feel rage. Someone criticizes your work. You feel rage. Someone interrupts you. You feel rage. The trigger is minor. The reaction is disproportionate. And afterward, you wonder why you lost control. This isn't a character flaw. This is your amygdala detecting threat and activating a survival response. Neuroscientist R Douglas Fields found that anger evolved as a defensive reaction to perceived injustice, threat, or blocked goals. Your brain interprets these situations as attacks. And attacks trigger the fight response. Anger is what fight feels like from the inside. Here's what happens in your brain during anger. Your amygdala detects a threat or injustice. It sends a distress signal to your hypothalamus. Your hypothalamus activates your sympathetic nervous system. Adrenaline and cortisol flood your bloodstream. Your heart rate increases. Blood pressure rises. Muscles tense. Blood flow redirects from your prefrontal cortex to your limbic system and muscles. This is the fight response. Your body is preparing for combat. Meanwhile, your prefrontal cortex, the rational thinking part of your brain, goes offline. Blood and oxygen are being redirected away from it. This is why you can't think clearly when you're angry. Your brain has literally reduced resources to the thinking region and increased resources to the fighting region. Before we begin, a quick disclaimer. This content is for educational and informational purposes only and should not be considered medical, psychological, or mental health advice. If you're experiencing mental health concerns, please consult with a qualified mental health professional. Anger has three components. Psychologist Deffenbacher identifies the trigger, the interpretation, and the response. The trigger is the external event. Someone cuts you off. The interpretation is how your brain frames it. They disrespected me. They think they're more important. They endangered me. The response is what you do. Honk, yell, chase them. Most people think the trigger causes the response. It doesn't. The interpretation causes the response. Two people experience the same trigger. One gets angry, one doesn't. The difference is interpretation. If you interpret being cut off as dangerous disrespect, you get angry. If you interpret it as someone who didn't see you or as having an emergency, you don't get angry. The event is neutral. Your brain's interpretation creates the emotion. Perceived injustice is anger's most common trigger. Psychologist Tom Tyler's research on justice shows that people become angry when they perceive unfairness. Someone got something they didn't deserve. Someone didn't get what they did deserve. The rules were applied inconsistently. You were treated differently than others. These perceptions activate anger even when the actual stakes are trivial. Road rage isn't really about the 15 seconds someone cost you. It's about the perceived injustice. They broke the social contract. They acted like their time matters more than yours. Your brain interprets this as a dominance challenge. And dominance challenges trigger the fight response. Blocked goals create anger. Psychologist John Dollard's frustration-aggression hypothesis states that when you're blocked from reaching a goal, you experience frustration. If frustration is intense or repeated, it transforms into anger. You're trying to leave the house. Your child is moving slowly. You feel angry. Not because your child is doing anything wrong. Because your goal, getting out on time, is being blocked. Your brain interprets obstacles as threats. Anger mobilizes energy to overcome the obstacle. This made evolutionary sense. If something blocks your path to food or safety, anger provides the aggression to push through the obstacle. In modern life, most blocked goals aren't life or death. But your brain responds the same way. Disrespect triggers anger through status threat. Psychologist Dacher Keltner's research on social hierarchy shows that humans are intensely sensitive to status challenges. When someone disrespects you, your brain interprets it as an attempt to lower your status. Throughout human evolution, low status meant reduced access to resources and mates. Your brain is wired to defend your status. Disrespect activates the fight response automatically. You feel compelled to retaliate, to restore your status. This is why insults trigger such intense anger. The content of the insult barely matters. What matters is that someone challenged your position. Your brain treats this as a threat requiring aggressive response. The anger cycle maintains itself. Psychologist Raymond Novaco describes this pattern. Something triggers anger. You think angry thoughts. This increases physiological arousal. The arousal intensifies angry thoughts. You interpret neutral events as hostile because you're already activated. This creates more anger. The cycle escalates. You ruminate on the injustice. How dare they? This is unacceptable. Each rumination increases arousal. Eventually, you explode. Or you suppress the anger, but the arousal stays elevated. You're primed to explode at the next trigger. This is why some people seem to have a short fuse. They're stuck in chronic low-level anger that easily spikes into rage. Expressing anger doesn't reduce anger. This is the catharsis myth. Many people believe venting anger releases it. Psychologist Bushman's research definitively disproves this. Expressing anger, whether through yelling, hitting objects, or venting to others, actually increases anger. Each expression rehearses the anger. It strengthens the neural pathways. It reinforces the interpretation that you were wronged. Venting feels good temporarily because it matches the fight response your body prepared for. But it doesn't resolve anything. The situation that triggered anger usually hasn't changed. You've just practiced being angry about it. Next time, the anger comes faster and stronger because you've reinforced the pattern. Suppression is equally problematic. Psychologist James Gross found that suppressing anger doesn't make it go away. It just drives it underground. You still have the physiological activation. High heart rate, elevated blood pressure, muscle tension, stress hormones. You're just not expressing it behaviorally. This creates health problems. Suppressed anger correlates with hypertension, cardiovascular disease, and weakened immune function. Psychologist Ernest Harburg's research shows that people who habitually suppress anger have worse health outcomes than people who express it appropriately or people who don't get angry frequently in the first place. The anger is still affecting your body. You're just hiding it from others. Reappraisal is what actually works. Psychologist James Gross distinguishes between suppression and reappraisal. Suppression means feeling anger but hiding it. Reappraisal means changing the interpretation before anger fully develops. Someone cuts you off. Instead of thinking they're a selfish jerk, you think maybe they didn't see me or maybe they're rushing to an emergency. The reappraisal changes your emotional response. You don't feel intense anger because you haven't interpreted the event as an attack or injustice. Reappraisal has to happen early, before anger escalates. Once you're already in full fight response, reappraisal is much harder. Your prefrontal cortex is offline. You can't think rationally. The pause is critical. Viktor Frankl said between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is your power to choose your response. For anger, that space is measured in seconds. The moment you notice the trigger, you have a brief window before interpretation locks in. Psychologist Kristin Neff's research on self-compassion shows that creating this pause requires noticing your early warning signs. Heart starting to race, jaw clenching, thoughts getting hostile. These are signals that anger is beginning. If you catch it here, you can intervene. If you wait until you're in full rage, intervention is nearly impossible. Physiological interventions help. Your body is activated for fight. Give it something physical to do that isn't fighting. Psychologist Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory suggests vigorous exercise can discharge the activation. Go for a hard run. Do push-ups. The physical exertion completes the fight response your body prepared for. This reduces the arousal. You feel calmer because you've metabolized the adrenaline and cortisol. Alternatively, activate your parasympathetic nervous system. Deep breathing, 6 breaths per minute. This directly counteracts the sympathetic activation. Your heart rate slows. Blood pressure drops. The fight response starts deactivating. Cognitive interventions address the interpretation. Psychologist Albert Ellis developed rational emotive behavior therapy around this. Anger comes from irrational beliefs about how things should be. They should have let me in. They shouldn't have said that. People should be competent. The world should be fair. These shoulds are demands. When reality doesn't meet your demands, you feel angry. Ellis teaches replacing shoulds with preferences. I'd prefer they let me in, but they don't have to. I'd prefer fairness, but the world isn't always fair. Preferences create disappointment when unmet. Demands create rage. Changing demands to preferences reduces anger dramatically. The empathy shift changes everything. Psychologist Martin Hoffman's research shows that empathy is incompatible with anger. When you genuinely consider another person's perspective, defensive anger decreases. The person who cut you off. Maybe they're distracted because they just got terrible news. Maybe they're rushing to the hospital. Maybe they're a new driver who's overwhelmed. You don't know their situation. When you recognize you don't know what they're dealing with, automatic hostile interpretation weakens. This isn't excusing bad behavior. It's recognizing that you rarely know enough about someone's circumstances to judge their character from one action. Understanding that anger is a secondary emotion helps. Psychologist Les Greenberg explains that anger usually covers more vulnerable emotions. Fear, hurt, shame, helplessness. When your boss criticizes you, you feel hurt or ashamed. But hurt and shame feel vulnerable. Anger feels powerful. Your brain switches to anger because it's more comfortable than vulnerability. If you can identify the underlying emotion, you can address it directly. I feel hurt by that criticism becomes I'm angry you criticized me. The first is honest and addressable. The second escalates conflict and solves nothing. Anger serves a function. Psychologist Harriet Lerner argues that anger is information. It tells you something matters to you. Your boundaries were violated. Your values were challenged. Your needs weren't met. The information is useful. The rage response usually isn't. You can use the information without acting on the rage. Notice you're angry. Ask what value or need is involved. Address that value or need directly. Often, the anger dissolves when the underlying issue is addressed. If someone repeatedly violates your boundaries, you need to set clearer boundaries or distance yourself. Getting angry repeatedly doesn't solve this. It just makes you chronically angry. Understanding anger as a brain-generated fight response changes your relationship with it. You're not a bad person for feeling angry. Your amygdala is doing its job, protecting you from perceived threats. But most modern triggers aren't actual threats requiring a fight response. They're irritations, inconveniences, and disappointments. When you understand the mechanism, you can create the pause. You can catch the interpretation before it escalates. You can choose reappraisal over rumination. You can address the underlying emotion or need. Anger will still happen, but it stops controlling you. And that's how the mind works. If this helped you understand yourself better, subscribe for weekly psychology insights. Thanks for watching.